we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating that the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job is just be entirely ready, because we don't remove these defects of character. God does. Some defects of character, your higher power or God will probably just keep right where they are.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres. This is Eternally Amy, and thank you so much for listening. I'm doing a 12-step series once a month. It's just one episode a month. This is going to be step 6 for June. So in the 12-step program, you do kind of like this circuit where it's a step per month. And so 6th month means step 6. Imagine that. And step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So here's the deal with step 6. It's super short. It's like so short you could blink and glaze over it. Okay? And so as I go through this, just a little reminder, I endorse 12-step programs. They do not endorse me. So any readings that I do from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous or the 12 and 12 or any other literature from any 12-step program or anything at any time, okay, basically, is simply me drawing parallels and experiences. And basically just things that I've learned from these readings. So I'll read the readings in an intact manner, and then I'll talk about them. So that's just kind of how that goes. But I just wanted to, make that clear in case there was any confusion. I'm definitely not looking to go against the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous or any other 12-step program. So now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what I do with my sponsees when we go through step 6 and 7. And 6 and 7 a lot of times are done together. I do them together, but for the purpose of, sort of keeping this cadence going, with a step a month, I will talk about step 7 next week. Boom. So there it is. So there's a book and it's called Drop the Rock. And this book is one that if you're in the 12-step fellowship, you've probably heard of it before. It's attributed to, Bill P., Todd W., and Sarah S. And so if you don't know what that means, essentially in 12-step programs, because of the anonymity factor, they invite you to introduce yourself by your first name and last initial only. And that's simply for the purpose of not being able to be identified by anybody at any point in time, outside of the rooms, inside of the rooms. It's just to sort of show that we're all in the same club. You know how in first grade, that's how we did it. I was Amy C, and everybody else was Alistair D and, Brian G and all this stuff. So that's kind of the same principle there. In addition to that, in 12-step fellowship, if you're not aware, there is no ranking system. So there's not hey, everybody who's a doctor and a lawyer sit on this side of the room, and everybody who's a blue collar worker sit on this side of the room. So it's just another way that we show that we're on the same team. we have the same last name. And what I mean by that is if we identify as an addict or an alcoholic or whatever, it just shows that we are aware that we suffer from a disease of mind and body that only is curable through a spiritual solution. And it's not curable for more than just today. And so today I have a daily reprieve from my disease because of my spiritual condition and the fact that every day I do something positive towards my recovery. Something that I do, whether it's talking to another alcoholic, reading some literature, praying, meditating, whatever, I'm sowing the seeds of positivity and sobriety to my recovery. Okay, so this book, Drop the Rock, I'm going to read a little passage of it after I tell you about what I do with my sponsees, but I just wanted to mention it because this book is kind of where I got the whole idea. So what we do is after we do the 5th step, I live by a lake and we go down to the lake and we have a bag of rocks. And with this bag of rocks, and I just get them off Amazon, they're nothing fancy. They're not like blessed by a shaman or anything. We get the rocks out, we get the Sharpies out, and then I give them this list of character defects. And when I say character defects, it sounds like a real negative. It just sounds bad, right? And really what they are is they're just different forms of self. So they're manifestations of self, how selfishness and self-centeredness can show up in my daily life and keep me from being the very best version of myself is basically what it is and what the character defects are. And so they are nothing more, than forms of the 7 deadly sins, right? So the 7 deadly sins being, of course, greed, anger, pride, lust, envy, gluttony, and sloth. And so basically anything along those lines, anything that holds us back from being, able to take action and be present and help our fellows, all of that good stuff. So they're taking these rocks out of the bag, they're looking at the list, and anything that resonates with them that they feel ready to let go of, they write it on a rock. So I have them do 1 character defect per rock. And so then they have this pile of rocks. And then we walk to the end of the dock and we say a prayer and we throw them into the lake one at a time. And I'm there for support, but I let them do it. So I don't know why I said we, but I let them do it. And it's pretty moving. It's pretty powerful. And the whole idea of doing this tangible experience is that there's something that is triggered in the brain where you sort of remember it. It sticks out. And so moving forward, it's kind of a tough thing because now, you've looked at all these things that, this doesn't serve my best self, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get rid of it. But moving forward, you kind of don't want to have that like hanging your head in shame, sort of kicking the dirt mentality. And so I also give them a list of character assets which are basically the opposite of whatever it was that they just tossed in the lake. And so because they did that gesture and they said, okay, now I'm ready to have these removed, then you get to kind of claim and manifest the character assets, right? And we do, of course, get those from a higher power and from God. We just don't magically walk away from that experience and have all those character assets. But there is something powerful and empowering where you definitely feel different. That's how I'll word it. And so if you sponsor people, I'm certainly not, by the way, the person who came up with this idea. I'm sure that people do this all the time for Step 6. So nobody think that this is my idea. I firmly believe that there are no such things as like original ideas anymore. And so when I originally started doing this, I did it after I had been in a Drop the Rock group. And what that is sometimes you'll have these little breakout groups from people that you meet at meetings. Will give you an opportunity or an invitation to basically meet up with them. And, they've got some group going. It's some kind of, bootleg meeting after the meeting kind of thing. And I was asked to be in a group. So I had never read the book before, but it really struck me as such a great visual, right? Drop the rock. So we're going to drop it like it's hot. And I'm going to read a little part of the introduction to you. And it goes a little something like this. It seems there was this group of 12-step members taking a boat ride to this island called Serenity. And it was a truly happy bunch of people. As the boat pulled away from the dock, a few on board noticed Mary running down the street trying to catch up with the boat. One member said, "Darn, she's missed the boat." And another said, "Maybe not. Come on, Mary, jump in the water. Swim, swim. You can make it. You can catch up with us." So Mary jumped into the water and started to swim for all she was worth. She swam for quite a while and then started to sink. The members on board, now all aware that Mary was struggling, shouted, "Come on, Mary, don't give up. Drop the rock." With that encouragement, Mary started swimming again, only to start sinking again shortly afterward. She was going under when she heard all those voices shouting to her, "Mary, drop the rock. Let's go and drop the rock." Mary was vaguely aware that that there was something around her neck, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Once more, she gathered her strength and started swimming. She was doing quite well, even gaining a little bit on the boat. But then she felt this heaviness pulling her under again. She saw all those people on the boat holding out their hands and hollering for her to keep swimming and shouting, "Don't be an idiot, Mary. Drop the rock." Then she understood when she was going down for the third time. This thing around her neck. This is why she kept sinking. When she really wanted to catch the boat, the thing was the rock they were all shouting about. And here's what the rock was, gang. Resentments, fear, dishonesty, self-pity, intolerance, and anger. Those were just some of the things her rock was made of. "God, help me get rid of this rock," she prayed. "Now, get rid of it." Mary managed to stay afloat long enough to untangle a few of the strings holding that rock around her neck, realizing as she did that her load was easing up. Then, with another burst of energy, she let go. She tore the other strings off and dropped the rock. Once free of the rock, she was amazed how easy it was to swim. And she soon caught up with the boat. And those on the boat were cheering her on and applauding her and telling her how great she was, and how it was so good having her with them again, and how now they could get on with the boat ride and have a nice time. Mary felt great and was just about to indulge in a little rest and relaxation when she glanced back to shore. There, a ways back, she thought she saw something bobbing in the water, so she pointed it out to some others. Sure enough, someone was trying to catch the boat, swimming for dear life but not making much headway. In fact, it looked like the person was going under. Mary looked around and saw the concern on the faces of the other members. She was the first to lean over the rail and shout, "Hey, friend, drop the rock." Wow, right? So if you're not familiar with the 12-step world, I bet that resonates with you, at least at some level. It's very relatable, right? We cling to these things that sometimes we're not even aware of, and they're weighing us down. So we're going to look at the 12 and 12, page 63. This is the book, again, called 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Okay, step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. There are some old school misogynistic language in these pieces of literature, and we've talked about this before, and it's okay. Really, what we're going to do is set that aside and just go, it separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls, and, no gender at all. We're just going to separate the people, who have some maturity and wisdom, and those who aren't quite ready for that is really more accurate, right? And so the 12 and 12 goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all of his faults, and then without any reservations whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually and is entitled to be called a man who's sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. Of course, like the often disputed question of whether God can and will, in certain conditions, remove these defects of character will be answered with pretty much a prompt affirmative by almost any 12-step member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be just about the largest fact in his life. He'll surely offer his proof in a statement like this. Sure, I was beaten and absolutely licked by my own willpower. Remember when we talked about that in step 1, we were sort of building our character defects, that they're beyond our own willpower. We couldn't stop drinking on our own. We needed a spiritual awakening, which we're only going to achieve as the result of these steps. So essentially the point that is trying to be made here is that we do not remove our character defects. It is not something that we are capable of removing on our own strength. Just as when we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable, or powerless over gambling or shopping or sex addiction or whatever it is, we need help in removing that burden. We cannot do it on our own strength, because self-reliance failed us. We tried 1 billion times before, right? And so, God had no place within my alcoholism. I was not willing to let it go. Wasn't willing to let go my means, the catalyst to be, the way that I numbed out and didn't have to deal with life on life's terms. I just pretty much could not stop drinking, and no human being could do that job for me. So it was going to have to be God or a higher power. I was going to have that power come from somewhere else, right? And we talked about that when we read that part of We Agnostics. This all is kind of in chapter 4. And then in chapter 5, we talked about the instincts, right? These God-given desires. But when we want and take more than our share, that's when they become problematic for us. So in a very complete and literal way, all 12-step members have become entirely ready to have God remove this mania, this craze for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. So, having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other friggin' difficulty or defect? So this is a riddle of our existence, the full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least a part of the answer is apparent to us. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act, defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation. They seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct as they are humbled as a bottom. Don't you just love it that this was the phrase that was declared by a clergyman? It's like, yeah, that shoe fits. But anyway, we're going to just set that aside and we're going to continue reading. Okay, so page 63 of the 12 and 12. Okay, this is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations whatever has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator. Of course, the often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be just about the largest fact in his life. He will usually offer his proof in a statement like this: "Sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house," and that's, remember, steps 4 and 5, and then asked a higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It lifted right off of me. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like these are heard daily. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from this very obstinate and potentially fatal obsession. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? This is a riddle of our existence, the full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least a part of the answer to it is apparent to us. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act, defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation. They seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct. As they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol, the grace of God can enter them and expel their obsession. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. But most of our other difficulties don't fall under such a category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in the society of his fellows, and he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Indeed, God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man instincts to help him to stay alive. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us fully to eliminate our instinctual drives. So far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed from any human being all his natural drives. And so this part that I'm going to kind of flash back to now is last month when I was talking about the 5th step and I was talking about the instincts, the instinct pizza. Remember that? Essentially what this is saying is, once again, here we are faced with these God-given desires. But when our humanness kicks in, and we want more than our share, we want more than what's allotted to us, it just goes backwards quickly, right? So since many of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, so this is picking up on page 65, 12 and 12, it isn't strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose. When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible or due us, that is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. So notice it doesn't say, I like to stop here because even though it's a sentence before the paragraph is over, nowhere does it say, you are not supposed to want anything. You are not supposed to, have any lustful thoughts. You're not supposed to want to eat more than your stomach can hold. It doesn't say that. Some interpretations of the Bible say that, but this literature does not say that, right? Specifically, what it says is when we let our instincts go crazy and we take more than our share, more than we need, that's when we're just basically setting ourselves up for a big shit show, right? That's when things get out of control. And I myself completely get that on so many different levels. Whenever it is, I'm just even talking about too much stuff in the house, right? That never ends well. It doesn't matter what it is. Too much of a good thing, as they say, right, is not a good thing pretty much for us. And so step 6, this is the middle of 65. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating that the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job is just be entirely ready, because we don't remove these defects of character. God does. Some defects of character, your higher power or God will probably just keep right where they are because they help somebody else. So for example, for me, right, I've lost the power of choice in drink. That's not removed from me. But if I use that defect, if you will, to become an asset, and I let my higher power, help me to use that to help somebody else, to help another one of God's kids, then it's pretty incredible because I feel fulfilled and my defect has now become an asset. And that's kind of the point, right? Because we're not perfect people. We never will be, obviously. There's no such thing as a perfect person. There's just living in balance and living in peace and having freedom. And that comes from our higher power. And letting our higher power remove these defects of character that he sees or she sees or it sees need to be removed. And also, P.S., that is on the timeline that is not set by us, right? It is determined by our higher power, and sometimes they never fully go away. but yet we still manifest and cultivate the character assets, simply because we want to, because we get hooked on positive feelings, right? We get hooked on feeling good. And so when we used to get high or get drunk or whatever it is, we found at one point or another that only led us to a pretty miserable life, and we manufactured our own misery through overindulgence of that stuff. And so when we find that didn't satisfy us or fill the hole in our soul, we look for something else. And to me, seeking that higher power and seeking out fellowship of other, people who just basically practice self-improvement at any level, I get a rise out of that stuff, man. Like, I'm just a junkie for it. Like, I could just do that shit all day long. And so, is anybody ever entirely ready to have all their character defects removed? Yeah, I mean, all it takes is a willingness to admit that maybe our life could be better, right? If we allowed the work of a higher power in our life, essentially is what this is saying. So, like on the very bottom of the page, it says, the best we can do with all the honesty that we can summon is to try to have it. Even the best of us will discover to our dismay that there's always a sticking point, a point at which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. And so you can go down the rabbit hole. I kind of tried to keep this high level, but you can go down the rabbit hole should you choose, with all of the different ways that we are attached to things that we might not even have realized are character defects or are not serving us well. So maybe it's things like, I hear people say all the time, oh, well, I'm just so type A. And what they mean by that is, I'm detail oriented and, in some cases, like I'm a leader, whatever it is, like I'm just so good at planning. And they think that that's a positive thing, but it's not always, because there is no room for spontaneity in their life. There's no flexibility, right? And so nothing is perfect. We're never going to be perfect. And that's the deal here, is that, if you are type A, you may not want to give it up, right? You may not see it as a defect. And this is why, again, this is then deferred to our higher power, because our higher power knows every in and out, nook and cranny of who we are, and also knows what's in store for us, who we need to help and be available to, right? And some of those defects need to go, some need to stay, some need to go at another time, and some are going to change, right? And so we just don't know what is good for us. And what I mean by that is self can't see self. We can have a perception of our lives. We can have perspective. We can have a level of high emotional intelligence. We can have a high level of self-awareness. But at the end of the day, we can't always see, yeah, this has got to go. Yeah, that's got to go. So bringing it back to the rocks with my sponsees, they may or may not have a super accurate of their character defects. But that's not the point of the exercise, right? The point of the exercise is having the willingness to try and to become aware of some of these defects, these greater handicaps that we have as human beings that we collect over the years. I watched a movie on an airplane not long ago, and it was called Whale. I'm pretty sure it's Brandon Fraser starred in it, and it was about gluttony, basically. And, it's one of those things. It was such a good visual representation that, his own body weight, his own self, his own vessel was keeping him from being able to live life. Now, in that case, it's fairly obvious what's holding you down. But some things are sneaky, man, and they're not quite so obvious, right? Especially things like pride. I mean, I thought pride was being proud of somebody. Instead of like, oh, pride is actually arrogance. I did not make that connection before, learning about the 12-step fellowship and learning about myself and therapy. And there's all these nuances that I grew up with. I thought the word humility meant embarrassment. I did not know that what it really meant to be humble is to not have any attachments, right, to titles and place in society, because I have that stuff. So I'm clearly not humble. But, some of those things are their character defects when they get out of whack, when these instincts get out of whack, right? And then they harm others. And so just trying to create and paint a little picture for you about the difference between, having normal human being experiences, human beings, and also having these experiences that are just like, you're going to take a cannonball jump into a pool of instincts that are way over what you have the capacity to be in, right? We were never meant to carry loads that big, right? We were meant to do this thing, to do this life in conjunction with other people and with a higher power. We cannot carry these loads by ourselves. We lead stressful lives, busy lives, big lives, right? Many of us do. And some of us might be in a season where we're not leading stressful and busy and, productive lives as such. But it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything for the alcoholic who's still suffering, the fellow neighbor who is suffering, with anything, right? A lot of times it's control over other people. There are other programs for this, of course. If you've heard of Al-Anon, that's Al-Anon for you, trying to control others. And so the general point here is to have that willingness, be entirely willing for these defects to be removed, right? And to not be the judge and jury on what those are. Our job is to live our life and to check in with our higher power and to pause when agitated and doubtful for the next indicated step. Our job is to show up ready to be of service. Our job is to be there for other human beings and share our experiences, our strengths, and our hope, no matter what, right? Because somebody else needs to know that they can get through whatever human experience they're going through at the moment. And so I just wanted to paint that picture that step 6 is really, truly like the brass tacks. It's about willingness. And it's also about, and this is just a little addendum sort of tack on, it's also about, you'll see this over the next few steps that we do when we get to 11 and 12, 10, 11, and 12. Those are called the maintenance steps. So those are basically things that we practice on a daily basis to maintain our spiritual condition. So the addendum is, you'll see that what will help us more than anything throughout this process is to create a clear channel for our higher power so that we can start to feel what it is that our higher power is doing in our lives And usually, I'm going to give you a clue here. You know, some people are like, oh, I've been praying for God's will on this and I don't know what to do. Usually for me, and a lot of the stories I have heard, it's usually the harder thing, you know, and that's where you sort of know in your gut, you just know what you need to do. You may not want to do it. And that was me with quitting drinking. I knew in my gut that that's what I had to do. God wasn't going to frickin' help me become some, you know, normal drinker again. That wasn't going to help me. It wasn't going to help other people ultimately. So I had to give that up. And I wasn't willing until I was behind bars. And it was pretty obvious that I was not in control of it anymore. That's when I became willing. So, when is rock bottom? Rock bottom is when you stop digging. That's when rock bottom is. And next month, we will look at step 7. And so for your bailout bag today, just remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time today, guys, and take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.